My grandmother owned a car. This is an exercise in backcasting. It's about deciding what sort of results or outcomes we want from the planning, from the transport system, and how we're going to get there.
The City of Melbourne is in a fortunate position, in a sense, because it's quite well provided with public transport. But if we think of the outer suburbs, they will be increasingly suffering from a lack of adequate transport options as the price of fuel goes up.
Some people choose the inner suburbs because it's near things, and other people choose a big house. And to choose a big house that you can afford, you have to live out, and then you just accept these other things as all automatic. The number of people that do these 2-kilometre trips in their car, or 1 kilometre, I'd like to have a climate or an environment where people thought about all of those things together. You know, when you buy something, you think about, well, how far do I travel? What's it costing me in time? What's it costing me in all these other things? What can I do while I'm on the train? All of that. And people just just get in the car because it's in the driveway, maybe because it's the sunk cost, or maybe it's what everyone else does.
The amount of short trips we do in our motor vehicles is quite ridiculous. We're pretty lucky, as Nick said, the City of Melbourne, we're a dense environment, but when you have to drive to the milk bar to get a litre of milk, or drive to the big box supermarket and park the car, they're very much going to be things of the past.
Maybe it's a way of actually redefining the term freedom of choice, which was traditionally associated with car-based mobility. It really is about the freedom to use sustainable transport for our mobility needs and not be inconvenienced in major ways.
I think a good transport system is one that you don't have to use to live the life that you want to use. So moving less but achieving the same objectives in terms of work and recreational activities.
We've been plastering Melbourne with freeways for the last 30, 40 years, and guess what? Localism is being destroyed. People are driving long distances because they can, and if we want to get this localism working, we're going to have to do something different.
Whether it's going to a football stadium or a cultural event or a gallery or anything, at the moment we're heading towards a divided society where those assets are for people in the inner and middle rings of society.
And that access again broadens out to issues of accessibility, that the transport systems that we have need to be physically accessible to people with a range of different mobility needs, people with kids, with prams, with pushers, people in wheelchairs.
I really believe it's more about access rather than mobility. Like, people don't desire to be hopping in and out of their car every day and doing multiple trips. Speaking on my wife's behalf, I think she'd love to be able to have a childcare centre just around the corner and a milk bar very close by, and they are, because we've chosen to live where we have, but an awful lot of people haven't got that choice. And housing affordability is yet another outcome of the transport crisis we're in.
Because it may mean there's less travel because a person doesn't have access to the right jobs. That's not a good way to reduce your travel. This discussion is so far ahead of a discussion you would have around your own dinner table that it's not funny. Irrespective of the fact that a dinner party conversation might now be generally aware of the issues of climate change. The community has to come with us on this journey, or we don't get even a quarter of the way down the paths we're talking about.
Map the extended city, including our new developments, to ensure that everyone beyond the middle suburbs could get the equality of access to aspects of the city that the state invests in and which outer suburban people don't benefit from.
I recently got back from a visit to Zurich, and its central retailing strip called Bahnhofstrasse is quiet, and it's a marvellous place. It's a really good place to shop, to have a coffee, to just wander down. It seems to me most European cities are gearing their retailing economy to making the best possible environment for people to come and visit and be in. And transport has a huge impact on that environment, of course. So we need to sort of generate a transport system that doesn't destroy that environment.
Ideally, we'd love to have a transport system like, for example, Paris, where there's high frequency, high availability, high quality, but this comes at a massive cost. and whether some of that cost will be able to be moved over from the money that's currently being spent on roads, perhaps. But otherwise there's going to be significant amounts of additional funding which is going to have to come from somewhere if we're going to reach this ideal public transportation system that we all believe we need, and we do actually need. So then are there perhaps new models of funding that we have to be considering as well? Perhaps PPPs, which are currently used and which I know some people don't agree with, but currently used on road funding. They're just beginning to be used in public transport because it's not going to come free.
And rather than having growth for growth's sake or at the expense of other things, which I think we tend to do at the moment, economic growth actually comes before everything else, in a way, that we integrate and balance economic growth with other considerations.
I think just as the climate is a market failure and we need to start pricing what we're doing into the atmosphere, I think we need to do the same thing with transport and price it properly.
Melburnians take 20 or 30% more trips, for example, than Londoners and many European cities. They're very economically successful, but people seem to get around, but they actually get what they want with less travel.
I mean, you can have a thriving economy that involves less travel, and many cities in the world have much less travel than Melbourne does with really thriving economies. And it does get down to actually planning your city and saying we are going to be planning for less travel, we're going to be planning so that there are more local things so people can get there by walking, by cycling, and by quick, efficient public transport trips. And we've been shaping our city for the last 50 years to be maximising travel by having a sprawling road-based city.
Transport systems are not really an end in themselves, but a means to an end. And so we have to think about the alternative future in terms of where people are going, why they're going there, and what times they need to be traveling. And are we well organized spatially, and do our urban design networks support a different kind of mobility network? And I don't think we're there today. So the transition is not just a transport transition, but a transition in a way that we sort of spatially organize ourselves.
Employment and retail and services within a much closer proximity to home, out on the fringe particularly, will be a key part of that too.
We seem to see a lot more people gravitating towards inner city, village type environments where they don't have to go far to get a coffee, meet with their friends, catch a train wherever, and not too far to work. So I wonder if that preferred outcome is actually fairly clear out there and people know where they want to go, but we're not achieving it as governments and trying to facilitate it for people.
My own research has shown that I had a look at Melbourne in 1964. It turns out that when Melburnians travelled slower, they actually spent less time travelling. In other words, it's as you might expect. Speed, or its inverse, time per kilometre, is a cost of travel. And if that's cheaper, that is, if a transport system is faster, people are going to use more of it. So just going to a lower speed doesn't mean we'll spend more time travelling. We'll probably spend less time travelling.
The bigger issue is really a question of scalability, and when we talk about biking and walking, you're talking about shifts that are actually scalable and moving to kind of a localized network. You can actually imagine the kind of scale of change that we actually need. If we want to sort of think to about 30 years in the future and think about the actual climate change problem that we have in front of us, combined with adding another 1 million people into Melbourne in the next 20 or 30 years, some sort of small incremental changes aren't going to get us there. And I would suggest that what's going to get us there is probably going to include some things that are actually quite painful. And so the question to me about that would be interesting is, what are the painful things we're actually ready to do, or are we not ready for anything painful?
A business as usual future makes no sense, because we won't have a business as usual future, because either change will come from outside of this country or it'll come due to breakdown.
We must start those cuts now. In other words, we've got to get down to a target, but we've got to have intermediate targets, because if we rely on a last-minute technologies fix or something like that, we will